I'm not the kind of guy who shares personal stuff online, but something happened to me a few months ago that I can't stop thinking about. Maybe writing it down will help. My name's Rick. I'm 42, divorced, and I live alone in a small single-story house on the edge of a quiet town in Indiana. It's nothing fancy, just me, my dog Sam, and a job at the local hardware store. My ex-wife moved out of state after the divorce, and I only get my daughter every other weekend. That particular night, it was just me and the dog. I'd finished dinner and was doing the dishes, nothing out of the ordinary. The kind of night you'd forget, if it weren't for what came next. Around 9 p.m., I took the trash out. It had been raining lightly, that misty kind of rain that just soaks your hoodie without you realizing. I walked the bag out to the bins behind the house, left the lid half closed because of the wind, and came back in. Thing is, I didn't lock the back door when I came inside. Not something I ever forgot to do, especially living alone, but I was distracted that night. Sam had knocked his water bowl over, and I went to grab a towel without thinking. Just stupid, everyday stuff. I dried the floor, tossed the towel in the laundry basket, and headed back to the kitchen to finish the dishes. That's when I heard it, the sound of the door creaking open. I froze for a second. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Sam wasn't barking, which was weird in itself. He always freaks out over the smallest noise. But this time, silence. I stepped slowly into the hallway, expecting maybe wind had pushed the door open. What I saw instead made my stomach drop. A man, mid-30s maybe, average build, clean-shaven, black hoodie and jeans, was standing in my kitchen. His hands were empty, but his presence was so calm it made my skin crawl. He didn't look like he was there to rob me. He didn't even look nervous. He looked focused. "Don't move," he said, voice low but steady. Not angry, not panicked, just direct, like he was giving instructions in a boardroom. "I just want to talk," he added, raising one hand slightly like he was trying to show me he meant no harm. My legs felt glued to the floor. Everything in me screamed to run or yell or grab something, but I didn't. Maybe it was his tone. Or maybe it was the zip ties I noticed sticking out of his jacket pocket as he shifted slightly. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some guy looking to chat. He'd come prepared. My throat was dry. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He took a step closer, still keeping that fake, neutral expression. "Look, I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to listen, all right?" I nodded slowly, not because I believed him, but because I didn't know what else to do. Sam finally appeared in the hallway behind me, his nails clicking on the floor. He looked at the guy, then at me, ears low, tail tucked. He didn't bark. That scared me more than anything. Animals know. They know. And Sam didn't like this guy. The man looked around the kitchen like he was casing the place, then gestured to the dining chair near the counter. "Sit." It wasn't a request. I obeyed. He stayed standing, pacing a little, arms crossed. "You left the door unlocked. That's dangerous. Could have been anyone," he said, almost like a teacher giving a lesson. The calmness in his voice made everything feel worse, like he'd rehearsed this. I was scanning every corner of the room in my peripheral vision, trying to think of what I could grab, how fast I could move, where my phone was. Then I remembered. It was in the living room, plugged into the charger. Out of reach. "You don't know me," he continued, "but I've been watching you for a while. Not in a creepy way, just curious. You live alone. You keep a routine. You don't lock up sometimes. That's how people get hurt." His eyes locked on mine. That moment, I swear, I stopped breathing. He wasn't trying to scare me. He genuinely believed he was doing me a favor, like he was teaching me a life lesson. I don't know if that made it better or worse. I felt like I was sinking into my own skin, like I wasn't even in my body anymore. Then he reached into his jacket, and I thought that was it. My heart jumped into my throat, but he only pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside were more zip ties. He set them gently on the counter like they were car keys or something normal. This part's not ideal," he muttered, almost like he was embarrassed. "But I need you to stay put while we talk. It's just easier for both of us." I jolted up from the chair without thinking. Adrenaline took over. I didn't plan it. I just moved. The chair screeched behind me, and for the first time his face changed. Just a flicker, but enough for me to know this wasn't going to stay calm much longer. He lunged forward faster than I expected, grabbed my arm and shoved me back down hard into the chair. I felt the zip ties hit my leg as he fumbled to grab one, his breathing still steady like he wasn't panicking, like he'd done this before. I tried to twist away, kick, anything, but he was strong. I managed to land a knee into his side and he grunted, loosening his grip just enough for me to shove him off balance. I bolted toward the hallway, nearly slipping on the floor. Sam barked then, loud and frantic, as if he finally understood we were in real danger. I could hear the man stumbling after me, not yelling, just muttering, "Don't make me do this! Don't make me do this!" I made it to the living room, heart slamming in my chest. My phone was still plugged in by the TV and I grabbed it with shaking hands. But by the time I turned around, he was already in the doorway. He looked disappointed. Not angry, not wild-eyed. Just like I'd failed some kind of weird test. "You were doing so well," he said quietly. "I didn't want it to go this way." He started walking toward me again, slow and controlled. I held up the phone, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. "You take one more step, I swear to God," I stammered. He stopped, smiled. "Do it." I hit the button. 911. The operator's voice came on immediately, but I couldn't even speak. I just held the phone up, hoping they could hear everything. The man realized it too. His face changed again, this time panic. Real panic. He turned and bolted down the hallway toward the kitchen. I chased after him, keeping the line open, shouting my address into the phone. I don't even remember what I said, just that I screamed it until my throat burned. By the time I got to the back door, he was gone. It was wide open, the rain coming in sideways. Just like that, he vanished into the night. The police arrived in less than 5 minutes. I guess living in a small town finally worked in my favor. I was still on the floor by the back door, holding Sam like a lifeline. They searched the area, took my statement, dusted for prints. None were useful. No signs of forced entry, no weapon left behind, just the bag of zip ties and a wet footprint near the doorway. That footprint didn't match my shoes. It didn't match anyone's. They said it looked like a boot print, but an old one, like military style. The officer looked at me and asked, "You're sure he didn't take anything?" And I said no, because he didn't. But he left something behind that still hasn't gone away. The feeling that someone watched me, walked right in, and almost made me disappear without a sound. For weeks after it happened, I couldn't sleep properly. Every creak, every gust of wind outside, every shadow across the floor would send my heart racing. I installed cameras the very next day, changed all the locks, got a new deadbolt for the back door. But none of that made me feel safer. Because the worst part isn't what he did, it's what he didn't. He didn't break in. He didn't scream or threaten. He didn't even hurt me. He walked into my life like it was planned, and he walked out like he knew he could come back whenever he wanted. That kind of calm? That sticks with you. I went through every scenario in my head. Was he a drifter? Ex-military? Someone I unknowingly pissed off? Nothing added up. There were no follow-up reports, no similar break-ins, no trace of him on any neighborhood camera. The police dropped the case after a month, said there was nothing else to follow. I started seeing a therapist. I had to. I couldn't stand being in my own house at night. I kept replaying his voice in my head. "You don't know me, but I've been watching you." That line plays over and over some nights, like a broken record with teeth. The one thing I did find later, and I still don't know what to make of it, was a small folded piece of paper that had gotten stuck under the leg of the fridge, probably during the struggle. It was blank on one side. On the other, just a single sentence typed out in all caps. "If this door had been locked, I wouldn't have bothered." No name, no signature. Just that. I showed it to the cops, but it didn't change anything. They said it didn't constitute a threat. But to me, that was the scariest part of it all. It wasn't a threat. It was a choice. It's been 6 months now. I moved to another town, closer to my daughter. I tell people it was for work, and maybe that's partly true. But really, I just couldn't stay in that house anymore. I still check my locks 5 times every night. I still wake up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats. And sometimes I think about that man, not because I'm afraid he'll come back, but because I think he meant it. If that door had been locked, he would have just kept walking. I don't usually post on forums like this, but I haven't been able to sleep since it happened, and writing it down feels like the only way to process it. My name's Samantha, I'm 32, and this happened just 2 months ago, right after I finally got out of a relationship I should have ended a long time ago. I'd been with Drew for nearly 3 years, and at first, he was the kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and left notes on your mirror. But as the months passed, it all turned into control. Who I talked to, where I went, what I wore. I convinced myself for too long that it was love. When I finally broke it off, I moved across town into a mid-size apartment complex, changed my number, blocked him on everything. I even got a new job further from where we used to live. I thought I'd finally shaken him off. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor. Nothing fancy, but it felt like freedom. There was a view of the parking lot, a creaky laundry closet, and a small balcony that barely fit a chair. But for me, it was a fresh start. I remember feeling proud every time I slid my new keys into the lock. Still, I kept a low profile. I didn't post about the move. Only 3 people knew my new address: my sister, my best friend Kayla, and my landlord. So when I started getting messages again, from random numbers with no names attached, I told myself it was just spam. I didn't want to believe it could be him. The messages weren't threatening at first. They were just weird. Things like, "Miss your coffee breath in the mornings," or "The green looks good on you." They'd show up at random hours from different area codes. I'd block one number, another would appear a week later. But what really started to scare me was when one said, "You always leave the porch light on but never step outside." That's when I knew he had found me again. My porch light is on a timer, 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I hadn't told anyone about that habit. I started triple-checking the doors and windows every night, especially the bedroom window, which had one of those janky old latches I hadn't gotten around to fixing. The complex was built in the late 80s, and that room faced a narrow alley, quiet, shadowy, the kind of place people forget exists. Then came that Thursday night. I remember it so vividly because it was the first truly cold night of the season. The kind of night where the wind slips through the gaps in your window and everything feels unsettled. I was in bed, scrolling mindlessly on my phone with the lights off, when I heard it. A soft, irregular scraping. Not like wind, not like the usual creaks of old buildings. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone testing something. I froze, my ears straining in the dark. Then, unmistakably, the sound of the bedroom window lock shifting. That old latch. My stomach dropped. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I knew in that instant I wasn't alone. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, phone still in hand, and tiptoed toward the laundry closet just outside my bedroom. It was the only place in the apartment with a solid door that didn't creak, and was small enough to muffle any sound if I had to hide. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't want to turn on any lights. I didn't want to make any noise. I crouched down inside, pulling the folding door shut gently until it clicked. My knees were jammed against the washer. I held my phone close to my chest and opened my texts. My fingers were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to type. I sent a message to Kayla. "Someone's inside. Call the cops." A few seconds later I heard it. The unmistakable thud of someone landing softly on the bedroom floor. He was in. My throat tightened. I covered my mouth with one hand and squeezed my phone with the other, trying not to sob. I could hear him moving, slow, cautious footsteps like he was trying to figure out if I was awake. A pause. Then, the unmistakable rustle of a plastic bag. That sound took me back immediately to a fight we'd had months ago, where Drew had packed a go bag in the middle of an argument just to guilt me. He always carried duct tape in his tool bag. I remembered that detail right as I heard the distinct rip of it being peeled from the roll. I texted Kayla again, only this time it was just, "He has tape." I didn't know if she'd see it in time, or if the cops were on their way yet. I just sat there, breath held, while the sounds from the bedroom got closer. A zipper, a click. I pictured his gloves, the black leather ones he used to wear when he worked on his motorcycle. I could see the little details in my mind without ever opening that door. I was so scared I thought I might faint, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The next sound was so close I nearly screamed. He was in the hallway. My hallway. Just a few feet from where I was hiding. He stopped, and then nothing. Just silence. The kind that presses in on your ears like the air's too thick. I stayed like that for what felt like an hour but was probably 3 minutes. Then came the loud, clear knock at my front door. 3 heavy thuds. A voice followed, firm but not yelling. "Police! Open up!" I didn't move at first, not even then. But when I heard them try the handle and then force it open, I finally pushed the laundry door open with trembling arms and crawled out. I ran to the front room, and that's when I saw him. Drew, pinned on the ground, handcuffed, face down, with one of the officer's knees on his back. The officer nearest to me looked at me like I'd just come back from the dead. I probably looked like it too. They found everything on him. Duct tape, gloves, a box cutter, and, what scared me the most, a copy of my old house key and one that fit my new front door. He'd made duplicates before we broke up and somehow followed me to this new apartment. I still don't know how. The landlord swore up and down that no one but him and maintenance had a copy of the unit key. Drew must have watched me for days, maybe weeks, memorizing my routine, figuring out when I'd be most vulnerable. The idea of him standing in that alley, waiting for the porch light to flick on, makes my skin crawl. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't hidden, if I had frozen in bed or tried to run. The officer who took my statement said I was lucky. He told me, almost offhandedly, that guys like Drew usually escalate fast once they cross the line into breaking in. That they don't show up with tape and a blade unless they plan on using them. I don't remember much of what I said during my statement. I think I was in shock. Kayla showed up about an hour later and held me like I was a kid. I just kept shaking. The officer gave me a temporary restraining order packet, but it didn't feel like enough. Nothing felt like enough. He already knew where I lived. What was stopping him from doing something worse next time? I moved again a week later. Broke my lease, didn't even try to get the deposit back. I found a smaller place in a gated community where every window and door had fresh locks. I watched them install myself. I still sleep with the lights on. I still check the closet before bed. It's not just paranoia. It's like my body refuses to forget. I found out later that Drew had created multiple fake emails and social accounts to keep tabs on me. He'd even messaged Kayla once, pretending to be someone from work. He'd been planning something for longer than I realized. That's what scares me the most, how much of his plan I never saw coming. I still don't have a satisfying answer for why he did it. I mean, I know it was control, obsession, whatever you want to call it, but knowing doesn't fix the fear that stays in your bones. He's facing charges now, including unlawful entry, stalking, and intent to commit a felony. They say he might get a few years. But what's a few years compared to how long I'll carry this night with me? Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear the latch clicking open. And when I do, I remember exactly how it felt to sit in that closet, phone glowing, praying I wouldn't become a story on the news. I'm not the kind of guy who scares easy. I've been a mechanic for over 25 years, the kind of work that leaves your hands permanently stained, and your hearing a little worse off. My name's Eric, I'm 45 now, and at the time of this story, I was living alone in a small town in Missouri. I had a modest detached house with a big garage out back. Nothing fancy, just a single-story place with a gravel driveway, and the kind of creaky floorboards that remind you you're getting older every time you walk to the fridge. I used to run a side gig fixing up bikes and selling them out of that garage. Kept everything organized, wrenches lined up on magnetic strips, socket sets in drawers, bikes propped up like showroom pieces. It was my little kingdom. This happened in early fall 2 years ago. I remember because I'd just listed a custom Yamaha VMAX for sale on Craigslist and had a few guys come by to check it out earlier that week. Saturday night I fell asleep on the recliner watching an old Clint Eastwood movie with a beer still sweating in the cup holder. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I shot awake to a sound that I swear to this day didn't just wake me. It felt like it punched me out of sleep. A sharp, metallic crash. The kind of sound you don't mistake for raccoons or falling tools. I knew it came from the garage. Still half asleep, but with my heart already pounding, I grabbed the flashlight I keep by the back door and headed out barefoot across the cold kitchen tile. I didn't bother with shoes. Something in me was rushing, wired. The garage was just a few steps across the backyard, and the motion sensor light had flicked on, casting long shadows against the siding. I saw that the side door to the garage, metal with a glass panel, was wide open, the latch twisted like someone had used brute force. My stomach dropped, and all I could think about was the Yamaha. I figured maybe it had tipped or someone tried to steal it and got spooked. What I wasn't expecting was a man to be standing inside, facing away from me, holding a crowbar and breathing like a bull. I froze for maybe a second, just long enough to clock that he wasn't just stealing tools. This guy was wired, wild-eyed. He turned fast when he heard the floor creak behind me. Before I could even speak, he rushed me. I remember the sting first, then the crack, a blow to the ribs with the crowbar that knocked the air right out of me. I hit the floor so hard it knocked my flashlight across the concrete, flickering like some horror movie effect. He started yelling something about the bike and the keys, spit flying from his mouth like he was on something. I've had people yell at me before, angry customers, drunk buddies. But this wasn't that. This guy wasn't just desperate. He looked like he had nothing left to lose. I don't even remember deciding to run. My body just reacted. I rolled toward the wall and scrambled up using the workbench to pull myself, ribs on fire. He swung again, missed, and the crowbar slammed into one of the tool drawers, sending sockets clattering across the floor like marbles. I slipped out through the open garage door and bolted toward the house, barefoot, bleeding, half blind from adrenaline. The air outside felt like ice on my skin. I could hear his footsteps behind me for a second. Then silence. That silence was almost worse. because I had no idea where he was anymore. I made it into the house and slammed the back door shut, locking it without even looking. Then I ran straight into the hallway bathroom and locked myself in there too. It was the only room without windows. My breathing was ragged and shallow, like I couldn't get enough air in, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I managed to call 911, whispered everything: home invasion, man with a weapon, still inside. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I could hear the shift in her tone when I mentioned the crowbar. She told me to stay put, that officers were already en route. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life. While I waited, I could hear him moving through my house. Heavy boots, doors creaking open, drawers being yanked. At one point, I heard something crash. Glass, maybe a lamp or a picture frame. It felt like he was taking his time. Like he knew I was hiding but didn't care. He was there for the bike, I kept telling myself. That's all he wants. But when I heard him trying the doorknob to the bathroom, just once, a slow turn, then silence, I had to cover my mouth to keep from making a sound. I stared at the gap under the door like it might save my life. I remember counting the seconds between each creak of the floorboards after that. Every single one felt like a heartbeat skipping. Eventually, it got quiet. Too quiet. I waited a few more minutes after that. Could have been 10, could have been 30, I don't even know. Time didn't work right in there. Then I heard the police. I heard them announce themselves loud and clear as they came in. I didn't even open the door until I heard them shout my name. Eric? Because I was scared it could be him trying to trick me. When I finally came out, limping and bruised, there were flashlights sweeping every room and a tall officer with a calm face who told me it was okay. But the man was gone. They searched the whole house, then the garage, then the yard. No sign of him. It was like he vanished. But about 20 minutes later, one of the officers knocked on my front door and told me they found a car parked 3 houses down, engine still warm. A beat-up silver sedan with no plates. Inside, they found bolt cutters, gloves, and a box full of what looked like jewelry and small electronics. Turns out the guy had been breaking into houses all week, just staying low enough to avoid getting caught. Mine was probably just another target, except I was home. They got his prints from the crowbar he left behind, and a few days later they tracked him down in a motel off the highway. His name was Brian Whitaker. 32. Had a record, had nothing to lose. Just like I thought. When they arrested him, he had more stolen stuff in his room, stuff from houses no more than 10 miles from mine. The weird part? He never gave them a reason why he picked my place. Said he didn't even know I was selling the bike. Just saw the garage light on earlier that day and figured he'd try his luck. The Yamaha was untouched, by the way. He never got the keys, even though I kept them right inside the mudroom, hanging next to the door. Either he didn't find them or he got distracted. The only things he really trashed were a few drawers and some picture frames in the hallway. But the damage to me? That stuck around longer. I had bruised ribs, a cracked cheekbone, and a deep cut on my shoulder that needed 6 stitches. But even after all that healed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched whenever I was in that garage. Every creak, every flicker of the light made me freeze. A week later, I packed up my tools and started renting a small spot in town. Haven't worked from home since. I still live in that house, but the garage stays locked, deadbolted, and dark. I haven't even walked in there in months. Sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up thinking I heard that same crash, the one that yanked me out of sleep like a trap snapping shut. But it's always just the wind or some animal outside. At least that's what I tell myself. I'm not really the kind of person who posts stuff like this, but I haven't been able to sleep properly since it happened, and writing it out feels like the only way I'll stop replaying it in my head. My name's Emily. I'm 38, and I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. I live alone, well, with my rescue dog Luna, in a quiet little town that most people have never heard of unless they've driven through it on the way to somewhere else. Nothing ever happens here, and honestly, that's exactly why I chose to live here after leaving the city a few years ago. My life was simple, predictable, until last month. It started with a package delivery, nothing out of the ordinary. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I remember that specifically because I had a Zoom call canceled last minute, and I was in a pretty chill mood, cleaning up my workspace when the doorbell rang. The guy at the door had a delivery company polo on and the usual tablet for me to sign. He seemed overly friendly, like too engaged for a 5-second interaction. He asked about Luna, commented on my wind chimes, and even made some remark about how cozy my porch looked. It wasn't threatening, just odd. I laughed it off at the time, but something about the way he looked around, like he was memorizing details, sat weird with me later. A few days after that delivery, I started noticing small things, the kind of stuff you wouldn't think twice about if they happened once. My mailbox would be half open in the morning, even though I always close it. The motion light by the back gate flicked on 2 nights in a row at 2 a.m. But when I checked the security camera, it showed nothing. Then there was the knocking. Just soft, slow knocks, barely loud enough to be heard, at random times in the middle of the night. I told myself it was probably the wind or some kid playing around. Still, I started locking every window, checking the doors multiple times a night, and keeping Luna closer than usual. Then came that night. I had just finished dinner and was loading the dishwasher when I saw him. The same delivery guy, only this time, no uniform, no package, just standing on my front porch like he belonged there. He wasn't doing anything at first, just watching the door. He had his hands in the pockets of his hoodie, and his posture was all wrong. Like someone pretending to be relaxed but wired tight underneath. Luna started growling, low and constant. I stood frozen for what felt like forever before I finally managed to yell through the door, asking what he wanted. He didn't answer. He just turned around slowly and walked off into the dark. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every sound in the house felt magnified. Floorboards creaking, the fridge humming, Luna shifting around beside my bed. I kept checking the window, half expecting to see him standing there again. But morning came, and nothing else happened. I tried convincing myself that maybe he was just confused or maybe even mentally unstable, and that it was over now. But something in my gut kept telling me it wasn't. I started keeping my phone on me constantly, even inside the house. And I moved a chair under the doorknob in the hallway just in case. It felt ridiculous, but I'd rather feel silly than sorry. 3 nights later, I was in the middle of watching some random show on Netflix, just trying to unwind, when Luna perked up. She stared toward the back of the house, ears stiff. I muted the TV. At first I didn't hear anything, but then, faint knocking again. This time coming from the side of the house, near the laundry room. My stomach dropped. I didn't even want to get up. I just sat there straining to hear more. But then it stopped. Silence. Luna eventually calmed down, and I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe something fell off a shelf, or a tree branch brushed the siding. But I didn't sleep that night either. The worst part? The next morning I found muddy footprints in the side yard. Not boot prints, sneakers. Someone had been there. I called the local non-emergency police line, and they said they'd send someone by to do a patrol later that evening. But that was about it. I felt brushed off, like they thought I was just some nervous woman overreacting. Maybe I was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done with me. So I started keeping the doors locked 24/7, even when I was inside, and I bought one of those sliding door bars for the back. I also started sleeping with a flashlight and a pocket knife on the nightstand. It felt like I was preparing for something, even though I didn't know what. And then came the night I realized I wasn't paranoid. It was just after 9 p.m. I had just finished folding laundry and was taking Luna out for her last walk of the night. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, in hindsight. When I came back inside, I double-checked the doors, like always, put on some tea, and was heading to the bedroom when I heard it. Glass. Shattering. From the laundry room. It wasn't a loud smash. It was this sharp, wet sound, like someone trying to be careful but still messing up. Luna started barking like crazy. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone, scooped her up, and ran straight to the hallway closet. I didn't have a weapon, just the knife from my nightstand still on the table. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and called 911 with shaking hands. I was whispering into the phone, trying to keep my voice low while Luna trembled in my arms, growling through her teeth. The 911 operator kept telling me to stay calm, but my mind was going a mile a minute. I could hear slow, careful footsteps coming from the laundry room into the kitchen, heels barely lifting off the floor. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. They knew they had time. I remember hearing a drawer open. That tiny metal-on-wood sound that made my skin crawl. I covered Luna's muzzle gently, trying to keep her quiet, and stayed crouched in the dark, praying the closet wouldn't creak or shift. The police said they'd be there in under 10 minutes, but I swear it felt like 30. I heard a door hinge squeal, then silence. Long, tense silence. And just when I thought maybe he'd left, there was a soft tap on the closet door. Just one. That's when I realized he was checking doors. Probably figuring out which one I was behind. My heart was beating so loud I thought it would give me away. Luna started to whimper, and I held her tighter. I was ready to scream, to fight, to do anything. But then I heard it. Sirens. 2 of them, getting closer fast. He bolted. I didn't even see him, but I heard the back door slam open and the motion light go off. I stayed put until I heard voices yelling, flashlights moving through the house, and someone saying, "Police!" I practically kicked the door open. I was still holding Luna, and I just started crying. Not sobbing, just these weird gasping breaths, like my body didn't know how to come back down. One of the officers found me and led me to the living room while the others cleared the place. Turns out the guy had parked his car nearly a block away, probably to avoid suspicion, and had walked up through backyards. They caught him about 10 minutes later, trying to cut through someone's yard on the next street over. He still had his backpack with him. Inside, gloves, zip ties, a folding knife, and an old flashlight. The scariest part? He had no ID. Nothing. They identified him later from security footage and records from the delivery company. He'd been fired months before, apparently for inappropriate behavior on the job. He wasn't even supposed to be working when he came to my door the first time. He had just kept the uniform. Since then, I've added 3 more cameras, upgraded every lock, and I never answer the door without checking the feed first. The police said I was lucky. If I hadn't locked myself in that closet, if I hadn't called when I did, things could have ended way worse. I don't feel lucky. I feel different. I double-check everything now. I flinch when the doorbell rings. I sleep with the lights on in the hallway. I think the scariest thing isn't what happened, but how close it came to not being just a story. How close it came to becoming something I never would have walked away from. I'm Jason, 34, and I've been flipping houses around the outskirts of Charlotte for a few years now. Not the glamorous kind you see on TV. I'm talking mid-century ranches with gutted kitchens and busted HVACs in neighborhoods that are still finding their footing. This one, on the edge of a transitional area, was supposed to be a quick turnaround. I'd gutted the inside, redone the electrical, and was midway through laying new floors when I decided to crash there for a few nights. No heat, no internet, just a sleeping bag on a cot, and my phone charger hooked into a wall outlet I'd just installed. It wasn't ideal, but it saved me a daily commute, and honestly, I'd done worse. The neighborhood had that strange in-between vibe, a mix of young couples moving in and boarded-up homes next door. During the day, it felt hopeful. At night, though, it got quiet in a way that didn't sit right. I'd hear the occasional siren in the distance, or a dog barking down the block for too long. Still, I'd locked the doors, boarded the front windows from the inside just to be safe, and figured I'd be fine for a few days. My girlfriend Leah wasn't thrilled about me staying there, but she knew how stubborn I get when I'm in work mode. It was sometime after 3 a.m. when I first heard it. A soft creak, like weight shifting on old hardwood. I'd chalked it up to the house settling. The floors were original, and I hadn't finished securing all the boards. I rolled over in my sleeping bag, barely awake, and let my eyes close again. But then came the sound of a thud, soft but deliberate, followed by a faint, almost mechanical click. The kind you hear when someone turns on a flashlight. A second later, a thin beam of light swept across the living room ceiling. That's when my body went cold. I didn't sit up right away. My heart was already in my throat. The light moved like someone was scanning the space, slow and careful. I stayed perfectly still, straining to hear anything over the sound of my own breathing. Then I caught the faintest shuffle of footsteps across the floor, getting closer. That's when I reached for the crowbar I kept beside the cot. Not for self-defense originally, just hadn't gotten around to putting it back in the truck. I grabbed it slowly, praying the metal didn't scrape against the concrete. Then I stood up as quietly as I could and ducked into the narrow hall closet, pulling the door almost shut behind me, leaving just a crack. From that angle, I could still see a sliver of the living room, and the figure standing in it. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, and cargo pants that looked like they'd seen a lot of drywall dust. I couldn't see his face, just the angle of the flashlight beam bouncing off the unfinished walls. He wasn't rushing. He moved like he knew no one was supposed to be there. That was the part that hit me hardest. This guy wasn't trying to sneak. He believed he was alone. That made him bold. He walked right past my cot without even glancing down, heading straight for the corner where I'd stacked a bunch of power tools, drills, a circular saw, even my brand new Milwaukee hammer drill still in its case. He started loading them into a black contractor trash bag like he was grocery shopping. Calm, deliberate. I felt a rage rising in my chest, but it was smothered by something colder. Fear. I was one wrong move away from becoming a news headline. I shifted my weight in the closet and accidentally stepped on something. A stray nail, maybe. It made the faintest tap against the hardwood. The man froze. Flashlight off. Total darkness. My breath caught. I didn't know if he'd heard it or if he was just being careful, but he stayed still for what felt like minutes. Then, finally, he turned the light back on and resumed packing. My phone was in my hoodie pocket, and I didn't dare pull it out with the brightness on. So I slid it out slowly, holding my breath, and typed one-handed, "Someone's in the house. Call the cops." I sent it to Leah without hitting send right away, just in case he turned my way. When he moved toward the kitchen, I used the light from the crack in the closet door to press send. Then I turned the phone screen back off, praying it wouldn't make a sound. That's when I heard him testing drawers, opening, closing, probably looking for cash or spare keys. The bag full of tools was already slung over his shoulder, and it clanked every time he turned. He moved with this weird rhythm, like he'd done this before. And maybe he had. I started thinking, had he been watching the house? Did he see me come in? Or did he just assume the place was still abandoned? The back windows were covered with painter's plastic, and the yard was a mess. Overgrown, unlit, not a single camera. It wouldn't have taken much to convince someone it was vacant. And then it hit me. How did he get in? I was sure I'd locked everything. The front door was barricaded, the back was chained from the inside. That only left the side window in the utility room, the one I hadn't finished securing. I'd left a box fan in it for airflow, a crowbar and a little muscle, and that window would have opened right up. I stayed in that closet for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only 15 minutes. Every creak, every shuffle of his boots on the unfinished floor made my heart skip. Then, like flipping a switch, everything went quiet. No footsteps, no dragging, no rustling. Just silence thick enough to choke on. I didn't dare move. I kept waiting for a door to slam, or glass to break, or, worst of all, the closet door to slowly creak open in front of me. But none of that happened. I only heard the faintest jingle of keys and the slow creak of the side door opening again. Then, nothing. He was gone. Still, I didn't come out right away. I waited until I heard sirens in the distance. I checked my phone. Leah had texted me back almost instantly with, "I called. They're on the way. Are you okay?" I didn't reply. I just crouched there, gripping the crowbar until my knuckles were white, staring at the thin crack in the door. When I finally stepped out, my legs were shaking so hard I had to brace myself against the wall. The cot was untouched. But the pile of tools? Almost everything was gone, except the heavy stuff he couldn't carry in one trip. And I had the worst feeling, like maybe he'd planned to come back for it. The cops showed up maybe 5 minutes later. 2 of them. Young guys, polite, but clearly used to these kinds of calls in this part of town. I explained everything. How I'd been staying there, what I heard, how he'd probably come through the utility room window. They found the crowbar wedged under the siding outside. No fingerprints, of course. The plastic fan cover had been busted clean through. The officers were nice about it, but it was clear they weren't going to get much out of this. No cameras, no neighbors awake. Just another break-in at another half-finished house. I didn't sleep there again. I packed up everything I could the next morning, hauled it to my truck, and stayed at Leah's place until the renovations were done. I installed motion lights and cameras the same week, a little too late. I still think about that guy sometimes. The way he moved, the way he paused when he thought he wasn't alone. He wasn't desperate, like some junkie looking for quick cash. He was confident, methodical, like it was just another job to him. And maybe it was. But what really gets to me is this. What would have happened if I hadn't woken up? Or worse, if I had stepped out of that closet? I finished the house a month later and sold it, without ever mentioning what happened. The buyers were a young couple expecting their first kid. They loved the layout, said it felt safe. I smiled, nodded, and handed them the keys. But I still remember the look of that flashlight beam dancing across the ceiling in the middle of the night. And I still sleep with a crowbar next to my bed, just in case. I'm not really the type to share personal stuff online, but what happened to me last spring shook me in a way I still don't fully understand. My name's Maya, I'm 29, and I work as a barista at a coffee shop in Midtown. I'd just moved into a new place, tiny duplex, old but cozy, after breaking up with my ex, Jamie. It wasn't a clean breakup. He wasn't violent or anything, but emotionally it was a slow unraveling that left me feeling like a ghost of myself. The new place was supposed to be my reset. New street, new routine, just me and my cat, Olive. I'd only been there for about 3 weeks when this happened. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had the early shift, and I was exhausted by 8 p.m. I was halfway through folding laundry on the couch when I heard a knock at the front door. 2 sharp taps, then silence. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing there, mid-30s maybe, tall, buzz cut, wearing a faded jacket like he'd been on the road too long. I didn't recognize him at all. He looked out of place, like he didn't belong in this quiet street. I didn't open the door, but I called out, asking what he wanted. He said in this weirdly casual tone, "Hey, I used to be friends with Jamie. He said he left something here." My stomach dropped. I never told anyone where I moved, not even Jamie. I told him he had the wrong place, that no one named Jamie lived there, and that I was calling the cops if he didn't leave. He just stood there for a second, like he was calculating something. Then he shrugged and walked away down the sidewalk. No protest, no aggression. But the way he looked back at me as he left, like he already knew something I didn't. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing things, branches tapping the window, a creak near the back door. I even checked my locks 3 times. I tried to convince myself I was just on edge, still adjusting to living alone. The next night I felt a little more normal. I got home around 6, made pasta, watched a dumb movie. I even laughed at something Olive did. She knocked over my lotion bottle trying to get on the sink. I remember that detail now because everything after it is kind of a blur. I was brushing my teeth, pajamas on, when I heard this sound, like glass breaking, quick and sharp. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. Then came this awful silence, the kind that feels thick, like your ears are waiting for something. I crept out of the bathroom, heart pounding, and that's when I saw the kitchen light was on. I never leave that light on. And standing there, barefoot on the linoleum, was that same man. Just standing, not moving, just watching me. I couldn't breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't even drop the toothbrush. I just slowly backed up and slipped into the bathroom again, shut the door as quietly as I could, and locked it. I was shaking so hard my knees knocked against the tile floor. My phone was charging in the bedroom, but I remembered I had my Apple Watch on. I opened the text function with clumsy fingers and sent a message to Aaron, my neighbor across the hall. It just said, "Someone broke in. Call the police." I don't even know if it sent correctly because my hands were sweating so much I almost dropped the watch off my wrist. I leaned against the door, barely breathing, trying to listen. He didn't say a word. That's the part that gets me still. No yelling, no demands. I heard footsteps, soft and slow, like he was just wandering around. A drawer opened. Something clattered. Then quiet. Then more steps. At one point I thought I heard him mutter something, but it was too low to make out, like a whisper directed at no one. I kept waiting for the sound of the bathroom doorknob rattling, but it never came. Just this aimless drifting around my house, like he was browsing a store and didn't know what he was looking for. I must have stayed locked in there for 10 or maybe 15 minutes. It felt like hours. And then I heard another sound, a voice outside my apartment yelling, "Police! Open up!" I didn't move at first. I thought it might be a trick. But then I heard Aaron's voice right after, and that's when I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. I saw 2 officers standing there, flashlights drawn, and I just collapsed into tears. They stormed in, and I pointed to the kitchen, unable to say anything. One of them drew his weapon, and the other rushed in ahead of him. They found him under my kitchen table, curled up like a kid playing hide-and-seek, no shoes, dirt on his feet, and his eyes. They looked like they didn't belong to anyone, like he wasn't really there. The officers told me later that he was high on something, meth maybe, they weren't sure, and had no ID on him. They cuffed him, and as they pulled him out, he looked back at me with this blank stare, like he was seeing through me. He never said a single word the entire time, just that stare. That dead, heavy stare, like he was trying to remember who I was. They kept him overnight at the hospital before transferring him to county jail. I gave my statement, went through the motions, but everything after that night felt like I was underwater. The detective said they found a crumpled piece of paper in his pocket with my old address scribbled on it. My old apartment with Jamie. That's how he must have tracked me down. Maybe he followed me one day when I went back to pick up some leftover mail or something. The idea that he'd been watching me long enough to figure out where I lived now made me sick to my stomach. And it made me question how many nights he might have been outside, just waiting. The weirdest part is, I don't know who he is. Jamie swore up and down he didn't recognize the name the guy gave when he was booked. And I believe him. I showed him a photo the police took. He'd never seen the guy before in his life. So why lie? Why pretend to be Jamie's friend? Was it just a line to make me open the door? Or did he really believe it? I think about that night way too often. About what might have happened if I hadn't locked the door. If I hadn't worn my watch. If Erin hadn't answered her phone right away. The variables haunt me. I changed the locks the next day and added a deadbolt. Got a cheap security camera too, one of those motion sensor ones you stick near the front porch. I moved my bed away from the window and I stopped using the back door completely. It's been months now, and I still can't fall asleep unless I hear Olive snoring softly near the foot of the bed. I didn't move again. I told myself if I moved, I'd just be running. But I also haven't let a single stranger past my front door since. No deliveries handed over, no repair guys, unless they come through the company and show ID. I don't care if that sounds paranoid. It's not paranoia when it already happened once. I still don't know what he wanted. He didn't take anything, didn't touch anything. He just stood there and watched me like I was part of a show only he was invited to. I still get this crawling feeling on the back of my neck when I pass the kitchen at night, like I'm waiting to see someone under the table. Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers that night. But me, I remember every single second of it. I live in that memory more often than I'd like to admit. And I guess that's why I'm posting this, because maybe if I get it out, it won't live so loudly in my head.